Hi, I'm Dijana, and I talk. You talk. We all talk. All day long, every day. According to a research of the University of Arizona, we share approximately 15,000 words a day. 15,000. An average self-help book has between 30,000 and 50,000 words. So, we could write a book every third day of our lives with the number of the shared words. What an amazing idea. We could share our thoughts, our beliefs, our findings, our observations. And everybody out there who is reading this book would have the same understanding of the world as you do, and see the world as you do. And we could provoke change. Unfortunately, it's an illusion. And not the part about writing a book, because you could, with a bit of discipline and a bit of training. Yet, the part about gaining the same understanding and provoking change, that's an illusion. Because every word and every sentence written in this book has a completely different level of relevance for the reader and the writer. The reader lives in its own world and its own context. When I was going to school, I was always an A student. And when I was in the primary school, I recall that I really struggled with Croatian language and literature. Every time I had to read a poem or a book and interpret it, I did it in the way my teachers didn't like it or didn't want me to. I always saw something different and felt something different in those words. It was frustrating. But then I came to the secondary school, and my teacher said to me, "Dijana, don't worry, it's not a problem if you are seeing or feeling different things." Now, the two of us, we have a good ground to go into a discussion. And not only the two of us, but the whole class as well. In this way, we can learn together, with each other, from each other. We can learn to understand the world of our colleagues much better. And we can gain a shared understanding of the context of the book, or when the book was written. So you may ask me now, what has it got to do with the organizational realm? A lot. Because every time I've been invited to a boardroom with 7, 9, or 11 different board members who are eager to conduct change or become a more agile organization, I always ask 3 questions. The first one is, why do they need a change? The second is, why now? And the third, what do you understand by the term of agile or agility? You can imagine, I always get 7, 9, or 11 different answers. So how can we expect that hundreds or thousands of our employees should have the same understanding of the change if the people in this boardroom don't have it? This is why I chose today to speak about conversation and how it can radically transform individuals and organizations. And to do so, I will share with you 3 different stories and 3 different findings of 3 different scientists. And I will try to answer 3 questions. The first question is, why do we need conversation more than ever? The second one is, where does the conversation in the organization take place and how? And the third one is, who is it intended for? Who should be invited to the conversation? And who are the change agents in the organizations? The first story, or the first finding, is from Dr. Gerhard Wohland. He is a German physicist. He studied physics. And in the last 30 years, he observed high-performing companies, so-called high performer. And what he noticed is that in every organization, we have two different kinds of problems. The first kind of problem can be solved with knowledge. So if you have a problem, for example, which can be solved with knowledge, you can help yourself and your employees by writing some manuals, instructions, or you can standardize the process. You can have some different plans and methods. For example, if you want to go to the Colosseum in Rome, you need a map and you need someone who can read this map. Or if you have a car and you divide it into smaller pieces, you need someone with knowledge who can put it back together, those pieces, and you will always have the same outcome. The second kind of problems, which occur in every organization, have to do with ideas. You need ideas. The ideas of the market or of different organizations are forcing your organization to become more innovative. And you can't solve it with knowledge. And if you try to solve it with knowledge, with standardization, with processes, with manuals, instructions, you will get only frustration by your employees. So those problems can be solved through project work, more in projects than in processes. And you need principles and not rules for such kind of problems. For example, if you remember when you went into the pandemic 2 years ago, most of companies organized their crisis teams. And those crisis teams were conducted of different people with different expertise who are trained in different things because they were trying to find a solution for this very, very moment. But if they would apply the same solution 3 weeks later in this pandemic, it wouldn't be the same outcome. So this is the first thing you have to know. But why am I explaining those distinctions? Because it has something to do with time. And if you look back 100 years ago or 120 years ago, when we had the industrialization, when we had very sluggish markets, we didn't have any competition. Everything could be solved through knowledge, or the most things could be solved through knowledge. But in the 70s and 80s, we had a globalization. In the 90s, the internet came. And we are struggling with dynamics. We are struggling with surprises from the market. And now we have much more problems from the other side. And to solve those problems, we need conversation. So this is why now. The second question I wanted to answer is, where does the conversation take place? And this brings me to the second scientist. It's a lady, Mary Parker Follett. She was born in the 19th century and died, unfortunately, in 1933. She studied economics, law, government, and she was very interested in group dynamics, social dynamics, and she observed the people working in the factory. And what she noticed is that every person is part of 3 different kinds of leaderships. And if I take this word leadership now, and talking about it, I don't mean about the leader's style. I'm talking about a process which is happening in a company between all the people all the time. And we are always part of all those 3 structures. Where we have the leadership of position, the leadership of personality, and leadership of function. The first one, the leadership of position, this is the most common one which you can see in every pyramid or organigram in a company. And this is where the communication flows, mostly waterfalled and mostly one way. Be careful, I said communication, not conversation. So, the second part, everyone is taking part in it. It's the informal communication. Water cooler speech, cafeteria, and you are part of it every day of your lives. And the third one is the leadership of function. I'm not happy with the word function. I would rather see here role, because function is something which can put us in the leadership of position. But function, by Mary Parker Follett, was meant a different kind of role you are taking in this moment. If you have expertise or something, you are taking the leadership in a very special occasion. The thing is that she observed that the most of talking and conversation and focus is happening in the first two kinds of leaderships. And if we want to be successful, especially today, we need it in the third one. Which brings me to the last story and the last finding which I brought today. And for this story, it was a finding of Kurt Lewin. He was a social psychologist, very important person for the organizational development in general, human resources. And during the Second World War, he was invited for the American government to conduct a research. The US government had huge problems with the eating habits of Americans. They didn't have enough meat. They didn't have enough proteins. So they talked about how can they change the habits and show the people that intestines can be more interesting and put them in their eating plan. Kurt Lewin, with his colleagues, he gathered 120 different ladies, women, with the help of the Red Cross. He divided them into smaller groups of 13 to 17 people, 17 women, and he had two kinds of approaches. And one part of the groups, they had a nutritionist who told them why intestines should be used in their daily routine. The second group, they gave them the information to those women, and then they gave them the opportunity to go into a conversation, to share their concerns and ideas, how to implement it in their daily eating habits. How can they make new recipes, interesting recipes? The thing is that after a few weeks, in the first group with the nutritionist, just 3% of the people changed their eating habits. In the second one, it was more than 30%. And if we talk about the change and who could be the change agent, in the first group, it was the nutritionist. But in the second group, it were all of them. So, what I want to say to you, when you go back tomorrow into your organization, please take care and ask yourself, are you trying to deal with problems which can be solved by knowledge or by ideas? Who should you invite to solve those problems? And the third thing is, take care of the third leadership of function and put a bigger focus, if you go into the conversation on a daily basis, into this very leadership or this organizational structure. And for the end, I invite you to start change with your next conversation.